Hey everyone, I hope you're having an amazing day. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Christina. I am a naturopath, herbalist, GAPS practitioner, intuitive life coach, a leader and a mentor for those in the natural health and wellness industry. So I teach other naturopaths how to be naturopaths, other coaches and health coaches how to do their job as well. And I upskill them in those spaces. So I want to come and talk with you today about the bias of science. So if you are on live, let me know you're here, say hi. I'd love to say hi back to you. If you're watching the replay, hashtag replay, I'd love to come and feel your vibe as you are watching it live. So, the bias of science. Yesterday, if you scroll through my feed, what you'll see is that I put up a post about cherries. And essentially what had happened was that I went to the pool with my family, and as I was in the pool, I was doing lots of fun things and, doing handstands, and, I was doing even like some sort of yoga in the water with my kids and having some fun stretching and doing all that sort of stuff. Towards the end of the day, though, I started to get a bit of a cramp in my foot, and I realized, oh, that is that sign that my magnesium is low. And as I was experiencing that low magnesium, I told my husband, we need to buy some cherries on the way home so I can support my body better when it comes to that. And I can happily say today there are no cramps today after eating probably a little bit more than my general recommendation of 3 cherries 3 times a week to catch myself up. Hey Talina, nice to see you here. So I caught myself up on my magnesium, and then I created a post where I shared a photo of cherries and essentially what I was doing in order to help support my magnesium levels. And one of the things that happens, there are a couple of things that happen when I tell people about magnesium and cherries, and that is that they're like, oh, that's so simple, it's not going to work, so they don't do it. The other thing that often happens with magnesium and cherries is that people will then go and start to research, or they'll ask more questions, and I'm totally cool with more questions. But so what might actually happen is, and I've seen it happen a number of times, where people have gone cherries and magnesium and they go do a Google search, or they even jump into things like PubMed. Hey Kay, nice to see you here. So they even jump into places like PubMed to actually have a look at like the magnesium content and what else is in cherries and all of that type of stuff. So they've got so many things to actually say about this topic actually. And so they'll come back to me and they'll say, but like, it's really minimal. It's a really small amount of magnesium that's in the cherries. And there are a number of things to take into account here. One, nobody's doing really effective research studies on the effects of cherries on muscle cramps. Nobody's doing that. The cherry farmers aren't going to pay for that to happen. Like, it's not worth their small amount of investment or advertising money to be able to do that. For many farmers in Australia, especially if they're working with the big 2 or even a few more, what happens for them is, and this is a strategy that Coles and Woolworth have both used at times, which is to say, hey, can you create this product for us, and we'll pay you this much. And so the farmer creates the product. They go, great, can you do it on a bigger scale? And they're like, yeah, okay, they'll do it on a bigger scale. And in order to do it on a bigger scale, they have to invest in infrastructure. So they might buy machinery, they might buy more equipment to be able to do it effectively on a bigger scale. Then the buyer, what they do is say, hey, I'm not going to pay you that much anymore for that product. I'm going to pay you this much. This is how much I'll pay you. And the farmer who's gone into debt in order to build the infrastructure to be able to grow the abundance that the people are asking for, they don't really have a choice, because who else are they going to sell to? If they don't sell to this big company, who else is going to buy this abundance of stock? And so what happens for them is that they end up making really, really minimal, small amounts on the actual food that they're producing, because they're essentially being ripped off. And there's a whole lot of stuff about that, and you can definitely research more into that. So those farmers don't have a lot of money to go and put into paying for somebody to research the effectiveness of cherries on muscle cramps and all of that type of stuff. They don't actually have the money for that type of study. The other thing is, when we test food, and when we take, say, and I'm specifically talking about cherries in this point, when we take a food like cherry and we take it into a lab and we're starting to try and pull it apart and work out what's in it, what's actually happening is that they're using all sorts of different things to actually do that. So they might be using fire, they might be using ice, they might be using acid, they might be using some other solvent to actually pull it apart like alcohol. They might use some other combinations of chemicals in order to pull things apart and pull the molecules apart to work out what's actually in that food. Now, not every single food item will be the same, so every cherry is not the exact same replica of, one cherry that's been tested. It's an approximate of what's in that food. But the other element is we don't contain all of those solvents actually in our gut. We don't have those things in our gut. We have, digestive juices and acids that help us to do that. We have mastication with our teeth, that mechanical breaking down of food. Then we have enzymes that help us do that. But we don't have some of the other chemical components that, say, a lab might actually have at pulling a food apart. So even that research of working out what's in a food isn't actually completely the truth, because it's maybe what's there. But if we can't break it open the same way they have, does it really matter? Because we're not going to get it. Because if we can't break it down that way, it's not available to us to actually access. So there's still some limitations on that type of research. The other element there that I want to talk about is that our research, we think that we are like the bee's knees when it comes to science. We know absolutely everything there is to know. We don't know absolutely everything there is to know. There is always more, and there's so many different levels of study that need to be done yet, like the quantum level, the vibrational level. There is still so much to learn and figure out how to measure and to be able to test and trial. And so we make these assumptions based on the knowledge that we currently have, thinking it is the best and that there's nothing better. And actually, I believe in the divine. I believe that there's divine wisdom in the food that we have and how it's been put together, and that it's been packaged in this beautiful, complete nutrient profile for us. So, for example, something like iron. If you're taking an iron supplement, we now know, and we didn't know it before, but we now know that you also need to take a vitamin C along with that to be able to absorb the iron. At one point in time, we believed that just taking the iron would fix the problem. Now we know we need vitamin C to help absorb the iron. What are we going to learn next? So this assumption that we always know everything that there is to know is completely bollocks, because we only know what we can currently study. We can only know what our current parameters when it comes to science actually are available. And so there's still so much more, and we're really only just starting to get into the research of looking at nanoparticles and cofactors and all of that type of stuff with food. And one of the reasons for me that cherries work is that it has actually some of the cofactors that we need to absorb magnesium. So even though it's a small amount of magnesium, it's actually much more absorbable for us. And our digestive system doesn't absorb magnesium super duper well. It's not, if you just take a magnesium supplement, you're not getting all of that magnesium supplement because we just don't absorb it as well as we do transdermally through the skin. But in a whole food, we actually absorb that magnesium much more readily and much more succinctly than we do when we just take a supplement, which is why if you're eating a whole food, you probably need less of it than what we are told from a numerical level of how much you actually need when it is a supplement. So that's another element there, that the cofactors and the nanoparticles and all of the other stuff that's in there that we are yet to learn to study effectively are packaged up in it. And for me, this knowledge about cherries has been passed down to me from, the ancestors that have gone before me in plant medicine. So some of those people who have passed that down, some of their knowledge to me, are no longer present on the earth. But their wisdom has been effective time and time again. So they've shared stuff with me and I use it and I implement it and I see it creating results. And so I continue to share that information and let people know all those little nuggets that will be lost if nobody continues to share them. The other thing that I want to talk about when it comes to, and feel free, I can see a couple of people are jumping on, say hi, let me know you're here. If you want to add to the conversation, jump in, make some comments. I'm happy to talk back to you and, have a conversation. But the other thing that when it comes to science is we only get the science that somebody pays for. So there is a bias in science in the sense that if nobody's paying for it, it's not getting studied. And in order to study some of these things, you have to have a significant amount of money. So for example, I was talking with one of my friends who's currently about to launch, and she's trying to gather money to run a science program, a study that they're wanting to do. And it is a very small study that they're trying to do. It's going to cost $2 million for them to actually do this study over a 5-year period. So it's it's a lot of money to pay for a small amount of thing. And then of course, if it's a small study, then, you know, you've got all of the big wigs. That's not enough data for us to be able to make sure that that's the truth. Well, put some freaking money into it. But really, the people who have got the money to spend on this science are the people who are going to benefit from the science. So it's the same with pharmaceutical companies. They're going to benefit from the science that says this works and that this doesn't. The people who are making money are the ones that are actually creating and deciding on which science gets studied and which doesn't. So another friend of mine who works in the field of science was saying that there was a whole year, and it's still quite present at the moment, where the CSIRO were not taking on any study. They were not funding any studies that did not include GMO. So the only way you could get your food study done was whether it was a GMO food, so your genetically modified food. So for him, it totally went against what he loved, because for him, he's the belief that we actually don't need genetically modified food in order to actually feed the population of the world. We actually just need to learn to use some more of those organic principles, using permaculture principles, and learning to farm well, look after our soil, do all of those types of things and give back to the earth, as opposed to altering it to kill the animals. And so he couldn't get his study published. He couldn't get the funding to actually start running his studies. And of course, he had to do some of the work on his own for free, and in a really small space. But he couldn't get to that point of it being funded by somebody significant, so that they could get really great data, that they could actually put stuff out there to really prove that this is a viable option. That funding isn't there for those people. Why? Because nobody benefits from that other than the health of the nation. But remember, nobody benefits from the health of the nation. Nobody's making money off the nation being healthy. They're making money off the nation being sick. They're making money off the nation being on pharmaceutical medication. And some of that includes supplementation as well, by the way. So the only people that are funding the science are the people that are making money of it. What type of science are we going to get? We're not going to get this complete, well-rounded science that we think that we have. And there is this worship of science at the moment where, science is God, and everything is, everything that comes out of a scientific paper is therefore gold and should be followed to the nth degree. That's not the case, in the sense that we're getting really subjective science. We're getting biased science. And let's say, and I've seen this happen as well, where the science says that the thing that they are saying should work doesn't work. So what do? They delete some of the parameters. They change some of the parameters. They remove some of the stuff from the data. And you can torture the data enough, you can make it say anything you like. And so the science is the final thing is not. It's not. It's absolutely not. There is so much more to it than, what the average person thinks. And the other element of that as well is that many of us, through the schooling system, through life, just through whatever sort of cultural conditioning we've experienced, have had this belief that we are too dumb to understand the science. It's really hard to understand science. Think back to high school science. For many of my fellow students, I know when I was doing grade 9, 10 science with my fellow students, the whole task was to get the teacher talking on anything and everything else so that we could have a bludge subject, because we couldn't understand what he was saying, or he was putting it in terms that we didn't necessarily understand. And so a lot of my peers, or a lot of my friends, actually have this belief that they can't understand the science, that the big words that they're using, that you know, the terminology that they're using, that they can't understand it. So we're just going to trust that what that person says is completely the truth. When actually, when you spend a little bit of time in the science, it doesn't take long to actually start to understand what the lingo is. It doesn't take long to understand what that actually means. And of course, you can use all sorts of things like science dictionaries and books to do that. And it's a really worthwhile experience actually starting to acclimatize yourself to the lingo of some of those scientific papers, but also understanding how those scientific papers are written. Because one of the things that we'll find is that, and I've seen this time and time again as well, when I've been sitting through and reading some of those scientific papers from PubMed and Google Scholar and all of those types of places where it's easy to find those articles, that sometimes the conclusion doesn't actually match the science that took place. And sometimes the conclusion has completely left out some of the biases, it's left out some of the compounding factors, it's left out some of the little nuggets of information that weren't actually in the scientific study. And so what happens is that someone who's a journalist, I use air quotes because I'm not sure if they're real journalists, someone who's a journalist will get the headline of this scientific study found blah, blah, blah. And then what we'll see is in the conclusion, all they've done is read the conclusion, and they've picked bits out of the conclusion and they've written their article on that. They haven't actually read the full paper. And when you sit down and you read the full paper, you can go, that's not what this study showed. That's not what happened. You've missed this, you've missed this, you've missed this. And you've not said that you've missed all this stuff. It's just the headline, eggs are bad. Eggs are as bad as having a cigarette. All of this type of stuff. And it gets thrown out at the general population. And they're like, oh my God, I don't know what to eat. Like, they told me eggs are going to give me a heart attack. And then something else is telling me eggs are good. And so we have all of this misinformation that really floats out there. And it's all based on the science. So I want to bring those things to the conversation when it comes to starting to think about, you know, the science is everything. The science is settled. Everything is proven. Like, really, truthfully, if you are a full person who is fully in love with science, you know that there is no proven. There is no point of anything ever being proven. There is only the point of disproving. You can disprove something, but you can't completely 100% prove it. You can say that this, you know, this looks like that's the case. We are looking like that this is what is actually happening, but it's not. It's never settled, because science is always changing. We are always learning new things, and we're always gathering more information. And this is one of the things that has frustrated me a little bit with the censorship that I'm seeing around social media, particularly on this platform, and the censorship around the science and the medical people that are on the ground and what we're seeing in actual clinical practice. So, which brings me to another point, because one of the things when it comes to the science in regards to herbal medicine and into nutritional medicine is that often the science is conducted around one herb, or it's conducted around one supplement. And ultimately that's somewhat ineffective in the sense that as a herbalist, I rarely give somebody one herb. Why? Because I know the power of synergy. The power of synergy is that together, the herbs actually create a better product. So 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2 when it comes to herbal medicine. 1 + 1 can equal 5 in the sense of amplification of one herb making the other herb work better. And, you know, that power of synergy. And that's one of those herbal principles, that power of synergy. And so when we're conducting the science, the challenge is that often they're looking at one herb and they might say, well, it hasn't shown to have any effective result on X, Y, and Z. But really, no herbalist is really going to prescribe that by itself. Most herbalists will prescribe that in companionship with another herb or another 3 or 4 or 5 herbs. For me, generally my prescriptions have 10 herbs in them, and I know a lot of practitioners will be going, what, you've got 10 herbs in them? Because at school we were taught to use no more than 4 herbs, or 5 if you have to, because of this whole ideology if you don't know which one's doing what. And actually, I like to trust the herb a little bit more than that. I actually like to lean into it a little bit more than that. And when I'm creating my herbal formulas, I'm looking at what are the symptoms you're experiencing today and what is the root cause of those. And I'm going to look at balancing the herbs that are going to help with the symptoms, but also help take care of the root cause as well, along with changing the lifestyle that created the problem in the first place. So I'm looking at all of those things, and no scientific study actually does that. No scientific study actually takes into account all of those aspects, all of those factors, and how it's never just one thing. And when I'm talking about health here, like, I'm not just talking about one thing. I'm rarely saying just do this one thing. I'm mostly saying here's a little nugget that you might want to implement, but really we've got to look at, like, what is the mindset that's taking place? What is the thought that's created the action that's created the results? And, you know, what is happening with your diet? Is it that you don't know what to do? And here, how can I help you with giving you that information of what to do specifically for you? And, you know, connecting in with that soul. So we're looking at mind, body, soul medicine. We're doing all of that work together in order to create the results. No scientific study is actually doing that. And why? There's not a lot of money in it. And that comes back to that point of, if there's no money in it, nobody's doing it, because we do, unfortunately, currently live in a society that money creates some of these things. And that's not to say money's a negative thing. I'm just saying that there are people that use it in a negative way. All right, so Leah is saying, I love eating the cherries when you suggested it. It wasn't something I usually reached for. And you know what? I had a great, delightful meal of cherries last night because I absolutely needed it, especially, you know, moving around, using my body more. Definitely needed it. You agree with everything I'm saying. I love it. And yeah, it's not rocket science. Like, once you start to, like, for example, if you say to yourself, I can't understand science, you won't be able to understand science. You'll be absolutely right. Your brain will confuse the information so you can't understand it. But if you say to yourself, I'm open to exploring, reading, delving into, dancing with, listening to, all of those things, you'll actually be able to find your way through it, because everything is figure-outable. You can figure out everything. Everything is figure-outable. And when you understand that concept, it's just like, it's not that I can't, it's that I haven't yet found the way to figure it out. I might need to actually plug into somebody else to help me figure it out, because everything is figure-outable. And I'm right there with you, Leah. It's not rocket science. When you really bring it back down to what is the basics of what's going on here, it's not rocket science. Yeah, as a shame thing, absolutely. I see that all of the time. Just like iron plus vitamin C, totally. And, you know, for me, when it comes to iron plus vitamin C, and for those of you who have worked with me or have hung around in this space for a while, you'll know that I'm a food first practitioner. I say that because I like to use food first. If we can use food first, we end up with much greater results than if we have to go down the pathway of supplementation, etc. And I count herbs as a food. So for me, herbal medicine is plant medicine, it's food medicine. And so I count herbs as food because herbs contain nutrients. They absolutely contain nutrients. So cleavers, for example, contains vitamin B. And, you know, I might recommend that to one of my clients who needs to lift up their vitamin B levels. And I love that when we eat food versus taking a supplement, we actually take what we need and leave what we don't. Sometimes with a supplement, we also get a whole bunch of stuff that we don't actually want to have in that supplement too, like the fillers, etc. And that filler might be something like rice flour. And if you've got a problem with rice, like let's say we've run a hair compatibility test and rice flour has come up, you don't necessarily want to be consuming those supplements. It just depends. Sometimes we have to, but, you know, ultimately I like to go with food first. And so when it comes to iron and vitamin C, the perfect way to do that is to add some nettle into your sauerkraut. Nettle is really great for supporting iron levels. So adding nettle, stinging nettle into sauerkraut that you've made or are making also releases more iron into that. It's going to support your iron levels, and it's naturally packed full of vitamin C. The other thing is then to eat that with some red meat. So if you're eating red meat and sauerkraut that's got nettle in it, or just sauerkraut, because sauerkraut itself is high in vitamin C, together you're going to get a food portion of that. And that food portion is so much better than taking a supplemental one. Sometimes we need to go with the supplements to lift you up quickly, but ideally we always want to come back to, why is your iron low? There are 4 main reasons for me when iron is low, and I go through those reasons and start to look at it. And then, is there a food that we can do to actually help to pick this up more effectively? And so absolutely, that's my preferred pathway. And Anita is saying yes, so good, awesome. And the cherries are amazing. I had so much help from them. And you've had so much help from that tip. I love that too. And you know, often I say this to people all the time, like, you know, you're going to think this is too simple, so you might not do it, but I want you to actually just give it a try. And that is that 3 cherries 3 times a week, and give it a try and see how you go. And if your magnesium is quite low, let's do a little bit more in the first week. Let's have, you know, at least 3 every day. And it depends, if we're doing a gut healing program, we really do want to kind of keep to that 3. But if we are not yet doing a gut healing protocol or program, then we might have a feast of cherries and then go back to that 3 times a week, 3 cherries protocol. And it could be that you make a smoothie with it, that you add it in some other way, you just eat them. It's completely up to you. But some people look at me and they're, that's what? No, that's too simple. That can't be the answer. Like, I've been like, and seriously, one of my clients has had pain in their legs for 16 years. They've been to doctors and they've told them to do X, Y, and Z, and nobody's told them, give some cherries a try, see how it goes. We can always up the cherries. You can have more if you need to, but really, seriously, 16 years to experience some pain, that's anyway. I'm not gonna go down that way. I could totally have a rant on that. Can I ask what blueberries are good for? We've got heaps of them right now. So blueberries, anything that has got a slightly different coloration. So if it's got purple in it, if it's got blue in it, like red will do this as well, but like the blue and the purples are like the powerhouses. So from an antioxidant point of view, if they've got purple in them, they've got blue in them, then they're really powerhouses of antioxidants. So they're really good for actually reversing the free radical damage. And they're really good for the gut. They're really good for clearing out things like parasites and helping your body with that. But the biggest element of how they help with that is that they're doing this work of the free radical damage. So they're restoring damage that has been done. And they are electron donators. So they donate to the work that's already happening. So your immune system and your regeneration system, it requires energy to run, and so they donate more energy to those things to take place, along with that free radical work that they actually do. So they're a great source, especially when they're in season, to keep eating. Tanya is saying, here's your next book, Divinely Designed. Oh, I love that name. That's so juicy. Divinely Designed. Based on this live and informative education. And I can tell you the one reason that I haven't written that book yet, and I totally could write that book tomorrow, is because of this idea that science knows everything and I need to back up everything that I say with science. I can't back up everything I say with science because the science doesn't yet exist to be able to measure all of the things that I'm going to say. So my husband's just bringing some celery that he's clearly just pulled out of the garden up the hallway. Was that what it was?
I just wanted to ask a question.
Well, you could join my Facebook Livers and ask a question.
Can you put these in a stir fry?
Okay, so Ben has just pulled out of the garden silver beet, spring onions. We've got celery and kale. Can you put them in a stir fry, folks? The answer is totally yes.
Right.
And while I've got it, so this is a vegetable that stands up straight. Celery is a vegetable that stands up straight. This, when it's actually in the ground, is standing up straight as well. Plants that stand up straight are high in silica. So if you've got hair, nails issues, these are great for you. They're going to build your silica.
Okay.
Thank you, Ben.
Glad to be of service.
He's clearly making a stir fry. So yeah, I've got all of these nuggets, but I don't necessarily have all the scientific proof. So there's a part of me that's delayed in writing that book, but then there's a part of me that goes, stuff it. I don't care. I'm just going to tell my people the things that I need to tell them. So, you know, that book's probably coming out, Tanya, and I like that. Divinely Designed. It totally resonates with me. Everything is figure outable. And look, Marcella just brought me some, where's my camera over here? Some blueberries from our actual plants. Make sure you go water that plant too.
I haven't been watering them, just because I thought what we did to
Okay, she's not. So you need to water them too. All right, so I'm going to eat some blueberries. I'm going to probably eat some more cherries, and I'm definitely eating stir fry because that's what's happening in our house for lunch. But if you have any more questions, let me know. I would love to keep chatting about this. I think we sometimes have to move beyond the science, and we have to look at, like, what are our foundational beliefs. One of my foundational beliefs is that we've been given everything that we need for health and wellness on this planet, and we just have to work out how to use it. Listen to the divine guidance on that. Acknowledge what, sometimes we need some help, which is where, like, I might run hair compatibility analysis to help you figure that out, and we will do some protocols to help heal the gut and all of that type of stuff. But ultimately, we've got everything that we actually need on the planet. We just need to know how to use it in order to be able to help ourselves with it. And I think that the divine made everything perfect. Like the nutrients that are in this blueberry, these are going to be different to the nutrients that are found in, say, a blueberry that is where Anita is, because the soil is different, the environment is different. So these blueberries are actually going to be more effective for my body in my location and in my area, because it is exposed to the same things that I'm exposed to. And that then makes it more impactful for me. We often look at weeds as a problem, but actually weeds are designed to replenish the earth. And so if we follow what the weed is trying to do, and we support that, and we encourage that, and we help that, for example, weeds will grow up over dirt that is empty and barren. Why? Because it knows that in order to change that, we need some shade. It needs some shade, and it needs to cover the soil so the soil can repair, and the microbes can come back, and the plant life can come back, and the animals can come back, and manure on that, and the growth can actually come back. But we look at weeds as the worst thing ever, and we cut them down and we thrash them. But actually, most of those weeds provide us with really good nutrients, because they have long taproots, so they're able to draw up from the soil that's really deep down, that's got trace minerals and elements in it, and bring that to the surface in order to replenish the soil and the topsoil. And so, like, there is this beautiful magic that takes place, in my opinion, with how that works. And if we lean into it and we trust it and we start to follow it more, we'll get the things that we actually need. All right. That's me ranting today. I hope you have an amazing day, and I'll talk to you soon. If you want to come and learn more of these things from me, you can totally come and join us in the Naturopathic Life membership, where I teach about, naturopathic principles, the natural way or the natural path. If you are a practitioner and you want to learn how to do more coaching style and bring in, like, the mental, emotional work into your practice, come and join me for Coaching Academy. And, if you want to start doing your own work, feel free to book in for an appointment for that too. All right. Bye now. I'll catch you next time. See you later. Have an amazing day.